At 35 years old, Adelaide Voss had lost everything twice. First, her husband. He had been a drunk, the kind who came home angry, the kind who one day raised his hand to a 4-year-old boy. Just once. That had been enough. She had taken her son and walked out. 3 years later, the town still had not forgiven her. A divorced woman in Wyoming Territory in 1878 was a woman with a mark on her name. The church had a sermon about her. The neighbors had opinions. Her own family had stopped speaking to her the day she filed the papers. Then came the second loss. Her uncle, Cyrus Halloran, died on a Tuesday. He was a wealthy man. He had cattle, pastures, a bronze plaque waiting for his name on the new church bell tower. And to his only niece, the woman who had shamed the family name, he left exactly one thing: a hole in a rock, 17 acres of useless granite cliff, and one cave at the bottom of it. The townspeople called it Halloran's Folly. Adelaide had a 6-year-old son, 22 days before her rented house was no longer hers, and no family left who would take her in. What she did in that cave over the next 4 months, no one in that town saw coming. And by the time the worst storm in the valley's history was over, the lawyer who had laughed at her would be the one signing his name to keep her there. This is her story. The lawyer pushed the deed across the desk with 2 fingers, like he didn't want to touch it with his whole hand. Adelaide Voss watched those 2 fingers, the clean nails, the gold ring catching October light through the office window, and she thought, strange, how a man's hands tell you everything before his mouth opens. Mortimer Thorne had soft hands. Her uncle Cyrus had not. Her grandmother Esme had not. Hands that worked were honest. Hands that pushed paper across desks were something else. Mrs. Voss, Mortimer said. Miss, she corrected. A pause. The smallest one. But she caught it. Of course. He cleared his throat. Miss Voss, the remainder of your uncle's estate is detailed on this document. You'll want to review it at your convenience. Convenience. Adelaide almost laughed. Because what convenience does a woman have when her uncle has just left her 17 acres of useless rock, and the man reading the will is hiding a smile behind his mustache? Her son sat beside her, Jonah, 6 years old, hands folded in his lap the way she had taught him. He hadn't moved in 15 minutes. He hadn't asked a question. He was watching everything. Halloran's Folly, Mortimer said, and now the smile was harder to hide. That's what the locals call it. Granite escarpment, north face of the valley. Quite unique. Unique. She knew that word. It was the word people used when they meant worthless. And the cave, she said. Yes, there's a cave structure at the base, mentioned in the final clause. His pen tapped the paper. Tap, tap. Apparently, your uncle thought it was important to specify. Behind her, somewhere in the room, someone exhaled through their nose. A small laugh, suppressed but not enough. Adelaide didn't turn. She knew who it was. Cyrus's older son, Garrett Halloran, sitting in the corner with his arms crossed and his pasture inheritance already being mentally fenced. Garrett, who had not spoken to her in 3 years. Garrett, who had told her at her own divorce hearing that she was bringing shame upon the family name. Family. What a word. She picked up the deed, both hands. The way her grandmother had taught her to receive things that mattered. Even things that didn't seem to matter. Especially those. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. You'll want a man to look it over for you, of course. She stopped. She turned, slowly. Excuse me? Mortimer adjusted his collar. These matters, property law, surveys, they can be complicated for a woman alone. "I'm not alone," Adelaide said. "I have a son. That's not quite 6 years old. His name is Jonah. He's right here, so I'm not alone." Mortimer's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. The room went quiet. Adelaide turned back toward the door. Jonah slid off his chair without being asked. His small boots hit the floor. He fell into step beside her like he had been waiting for the cue. She did not look at Garrett Halloran. She did not look at the clerk. She walked out into October. The main street of the settlement received them the way small towns always receive the newly humiliated, with a silence that was louder than noise, eyes that slid sideways and found something else to examine. The blacksmith's wife pretending to fix her bonnet. The clerk from the dry goods adjusting the same sack of flour she had been adjusting for 10 minutes. Adelaide walked with her shoulders level, her chin at a height that communicated nothing at all. Jonah walked beside her, his hand in hers. He did not ask why people were staring. He had learned not to ask. Behind her, she heard a woman start a sentence. From the dry goods porch. "Did you hear what he left her?" The sentence stopped. The woman had seen Adelaide turn her head a quarter inch. That was enough. The walk home was 9 blocks. Adelaide counted them. She always counted things when her chest got tight. Steps, stitches, the number of jars on her shelf. It was a trick her grandmother had taught her when she was 9 years old, and had just watched her mother bury a stillborn baby. Count something, child. Anything. The mind needs a job. 9 blocks. 47 steps to the corner of Adams and Main. Then 12 more to the elm tree the school children climbed. Then the rented house came into view. Small. White paint peeling at the porch posts. The kitchen garden she had planted in April. The garden she would not be harvesting in spring. Mr. Brennan was sitting on her porch. Adelaide stopped on the path. Jonah looked up at her. She squeezed his hand once. The signal. Be still. Brennan was a decent man. She knew that. The way that some men can be decent when decency costs them nothing. He stood up when she got close. He held his hat in both hands. The hat was old. The brim was sweat-stained where his fingers gripped it. "Miss Adelaide," he said. "Mr. Brennan." He looked at his hat. "I came by to talk to you." She waited. "My boy, he's getting married in November." "Congratulations." Yes, well, thank you. The thing is, they'll be needing a place. And I have a piece of land, this piece of land. And I told him he could. How long do I have?" Brennan looked up, surprised. Like she had skipped to the end of a play he was hoping to perform in full. 22 days. 22. The number landed in her chest like a stone dropped down a well. She did not blink. "I see. Miss Adelaide, I'm real sorry. If there was any other way, there isn't." She heard her own voice, steady, calm, belonging to a woman who was not standing on a porch about to lose her home. "I understand, Mr. Brennan. Your uncle, I heard he left you something. Maybe. He left me a hole in a rock." Brennan flinched. She had not meant to say that. She regretted it the moment it left her mouth. Not for him. He was not the problem. But because Jonah was still holding her hand and Jonah was still listening. She softened her voice. "Thank you for telling me directly, Mr. Brennan. Most men would have sent a letter." He nodded. Twice. Like he was trying to decide if that was a compliment or an indictment. He left without putting his hat back on. Adelaide watched him walk down the path until he turned at the corner. Then she sat down on the porch step. Her legs would not hold her any more. Jonah sat down beside her. He did not ask anything. He took a small gray stone out of his pocket. Smooth, oval, the kind that the creek made out of patience and time. He placed it in her palm without explanation, the way 6-year-olds give gifts, with total seriousness, had no ceremony whatsoever. Adelaide closed her hand around it. "Where do we go, Mama?" His voice, quiet, practical, not afraid. Not afraid yet. She looked at her boy, his father's eyes, her mother's mouth, and something else, something entirely his own. A watchfulness she had never been able to name. "I don't know yet, baby." He nodded. Like that was an acceptable answer, like he trusted her to know by tomorrow. That trust was going to break her if she let it. She did not let it. That night, Adelaide did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with one candle burning. The deed unfolded in front of her. Halloran's Folly, 17 acres, one cave structure. Beside the deed sat the only thing in this house that had truly belonged to her since the day she got married at 20, a leather notebook. The leather was cracked at the spine. The cover was the color of a creek bed in August. The pages inside were thin and brown at the edges, and the handwriting was her grandmother's. Esme Halloran had died when Adelaide was 12 years old. She had left 2 things behind: the notebook, and one sentence Adelaide had never forgotten. "Stone makes no promises, child, but stone breaks none either." Adelaide opened the notebook. She had read it 100 times, maybe more, as a girl, as a young wife, as a divorced woman with a baby on her hip. The notebook had been her companion, her grandmother's voice on paper, plant identifications, recipes, notes about weather, lists of things a woman should know if she found herself somewhere she had not planned to be. The first entry was dated 1849. Adelaide had always wondered about that year. Esme had married in 1842. She had borne a daughter in 1843, Adelaide's mother. So, in 1849, Esme already had a husband and a young child. What had she been doing in 1849? Where had she been? Why was she alone? The entries seemed to suggest she was alone, when she should have been at home with a 6-year-old daughter. The notebook never quite said, until now. Adelaide turned to a page she had read before, but this time she read it differently, because this time she had a deed to a cave on her kitchen table. The notebook entry said, "October, the valley below the cliffs. Wind comes down funny here. Curls, doesn't fall straight. Found a cave at the base of the rock face. Spent 3 nights. Fissure in the ceiling pulls the smoke. Could winter here if I had to. He won't find me here. He won't find me here." Adelaide read it again, and again. Her hand went to her mouth. He, her grandfather. The man Adelaide had grown up calling Grandpa Halloran. The man who had been silent at the dinner table, who had once thrown a bowl of stew across the kitchen because his coffee was too cold. The grandmother she had idolized had run, in 1849, with a 6-year-old daughter somewhere safe with a sister, perhaps, to this same cave, to hide. Esme had survived a marriage she could not stay in. Esme had found the cave first. Esme had come back later, after he was gone, after he died of fever in 1857. The grandmother Adelaide remembered as serene and gray-haired had been a woman who once needed a hole in the rock to disappear into. Halloran's Folly was not her Uncle Cyrus's contempt. Halloran's Folly was a hand reaching across 30 years. A grandmother saying, "I survived. So can you." Adelaide closed the notebook. She put both hands flat on the cover. Her shoulders shook. Once. Twice. She did not cry. She breathed. Then she stood up. She went to the back of the house, to the closet under the stairs. She pulled out the canvas roll where her tools were kept. The few she owned, a hatchet that had belonged to her father, a whetstone, a small cast-iron pot, the seed packets she had been saving for the spring she would not see. She started packing. It was 3 a.m. The candle burned low, and Adelaide Voss was making a list in her head of everything that mattered. The notebook went on the list first. Jonah found her at dawn. He stood in the kitchen doorway in his nightshirt, bare feet on the cold floor, his hair sticking up on one side the way it always did. He looked at the kitchen. Half the cabinets were empty. Jars were lined up on the table by size. The cast-iron pot was wrapped in cloth. The blanket from her bed was folded into a tight square. "Mama." "Yes, baby." "Are we leaving?" "Yes." "Where are we going?" She turned around. She knelt down. She put her hands on his small shoulders. "We're going to a place your great-grandmother once stayed, a long time ago, before I was born." He thought about that. "Is it far?" 2 days walking." "Will it be cold?" "Yes." "Will we have a fire?" "Yes." He nodded. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Will you be there?" Adelaide pulled him close, her face in his hair. She felt his heartbeat against her collarbone. So small, so fast, so absolutely sure. "Yes, Jonah, I will be there." "Then it's okay." He pulled back. He looked at the kitchen. "What can I do?" She almost laughed. "You can pack your things, whatever you want to bring. We can only take what fits in the cart." He nodded. Serious, like a soldier given an order. He turned and went to his room. Adelaide stood up. She did not know yet that the bundle Jonah would bring would contain 7 gray stones, a piece of birch bark with an owl drawn on it, 2 shirts, and a small wooden horse her father had carved before he died. She only knew this. She had a deed to a cave, a notebook from a grandmother who had once needed it, a 6-year-old who trusted her completely, and 22 days. It was enough. It would have to be enough. The next morning, Adelaide walked to the only person in town she still considered a friend. Hollis Peterson lived 4 blocks east, in a wood-frame house that leaned slightly to the south. He was a wheat farmer, a widower. His wife had died of fever in '74. He was 40-something. He had once helped Adelaide carry firewood the winter after her divorce, and he had not asked for anything in return. She had remembered that. She had remembered it for 3 years. He was at his kitchen table when she knocked. He stood up too fast and knocked the chair backward. She pretended not to notice. "Adelaide, come in. Sit down. I heard about—" "I need a favor, Hollis." He paused. "All right?" "I need to borrow a cart for 2 days. I'll bring it back." "What for?" "I'm leaving." He stared at her. "Leaving where?" "Halloran's Folly." His face did something complicated. She watched him work through it. The disbelief, the protest forming behind his teeth, the realization that she was not asking his opinion, the quiet calculation of what a man does when a woman tells him the unreasonable thing she has decided to do. "He chose well," he said. "I'll bring it by tonight, and a sack of flour. Don't argue with me about the flour." She did not argue. She turned to go. At the door, she stopped. "Hollis." "Yeah?" "Don't tell anyone." "I wasn't going to." She walked home. The wind was cold for October. Above the northern ridge, the sky had a color she could not quite name, a flat, metallic sheen, like the side of a knife held at an angle to a light source she could not see. Her grandmother had a name for that color. Ismay had called it the sky taking a breath. Adelaide pulled her shawl tighter and kept walking. They left on a Tuesday morning. The frost had not melted from the grass. Adelaide pulled the cart from the front. Hollis had loaned her a hand cart with 2 wooden wheels and a long handle. The wheels found every rut in the road. The cart was heavier than it looked. Inside it was everything she still owned: 20 pounds of seed potatoes, the cast-iron pot, the wool blankets, the notebook wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom, the hatchet, the Bible, the seeds, the lard, the dried meat she had been saving since August. Jonah walked beside her with his bundle under his arm. His small boots hit the road with a purposefulness that nearly broke her composure. The town watched them leave. She felt the eyes the way she always felt them, from the hardware store, from the church steps where 2 women stood with their coats buttoned against the morning, from the upper window of the dry goods where a curtain shifted. Adelaide kept her eyes on the road, on the escarpment that rose at the far end of the valley, gray, massive, indifferent to what anyone in town thought of it. That indifference, she was beginning to understand, was its own kind of gift. Halfway out of town, a voice called her name. She turned. Reverend Holt was standing in front of the church. His coat was buttoned. His hands were behind his back. Adelaide knew this man. He had buried her grandmother. He had married her. He had, 3 months after her divorce, given a sermon about women who break their vows and looked directly at her in the 3rd pew until she stood up and walked out and never came back. Adelaide Voss, he said. She stopped the cart. She did not approach him. He approached her. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough to speak quietly, far enough that anyone watching could see he was not embracing the wayward woman. "I have prayed about you," he said. "Have you? I want you to know there is still time to repent, to return to your husband, to bring your boy back into a Christian home." Adelaide looked at him. She felt something rise in her chest, hot, furious, the accumulated weight of 3 years of his sermons, 3 years of his sideways glances. She did not let it out. She thought of her grandmother, Esmé, who had once also been told to return to her husband, by men just like this one. She spoke the way Esmé would have spoken, quiet, final. "Reverend Holt." "Yes. My husband drank. He raised his hand to my child. The Lord saw it. I am at peace with the Lord. I am not at peace with you." His face changed. "That is not. Pray for the man who broke the vow, not for the woman who survived it." She picked up the cart handle. "Good day, Reverend." She walked past him. Jonah looked up at her once, just once, his small face full of something she could not read. Then he looked straight ahead and kept walking. She did not turn back. She had decided, the moment her fingers had touched that deed, that she was finished looking back. They reached Halloran's Folly in the early afternoon of the 2nd day. Adelaide had not slept well the night they camped by the creek. The cold had settled into her shoulders. Her hands were raw from the cart handle. She had given Jonah her 2nd blanket and had lain awake, counting stars and listening for animals, and trying not to think about what she would find when she got there. Now she was looking at it. The granite rose above her in a sheer face that caught the wind coming down from the north and deflected it in odd directions. Standing at the base, felt like standing inside something moving. The cliff was higher than she had imagined, wider, older. It made the cart and the boy and the woman beside the cart look very small. The cave mouth was set low in the rock, maybe 4 feet high at the entrance, widening as it went back. Adelaide stood at the entrance for a long moment. Jonah stood beside her. Neither of them spoke. She thought. Strange. How an ending and a beginning can look exactly the same when you are standing at the threshold of either one. She felt held. That was the word. The cliff did not love her. The cave did not welcome her. The granite was not glad she had come. None of those were the right words. But the rock had been there before her grandmother. The rock would be there after her. The rock had no opinion about divorce. The rock had no opinion about what a woman could or could not do with a 6-year-old son and 22 days. The rock was simply there, magnificently and unconditionally there. She lit the small lantern she had brought. She bent her head and stepped into the cave. The smell hit her first. Damp earth. Disuse. Something older underneath both. The smell of geological time, of a space that had been dark for a long time. She breathed it in deliberately. What she registered was cold, but not brutal. Dry in the back, away from the entrance. The ceiling lifted as she walked deeper. After 10 feet, she could stand fully upright. After 20 feet, the lantern light reached the back wall. She stopped. She raised the lantern. She stepped closer. The wall was smooth in places, rough in others, and there, about to chest height, carved into the stone, shallow but unmistakable, letters E.H. 1849. Adelaide put the lantern down on the floor. She put her hand on the wall. Her palm covered the letters exactly. She did not breathe for several seconds. Esme Halloran, 1849. The year her grandmother had run from a husband she could not stay with. The year she had carved her initials into stone 29 years before her granddaughter would walk through this same entrance with a 6-year-old boy and a deed and a notebook and nothing else in the world. Her grandmother had been here. Her grandmother had stood in this cave. Her grandmother had escaped here, and she had survived, and gone on to live another 30 years, and raise a daughter, and bury a husband who never knew where she had hidden, and teach a granddaughter how to count when her chest got tight. Halloran's folly was a relay, a baton handed down across 2 generations. Adelaide pressed her forehead against the wall. She closed her eyes. She did not pray. She did not speak. She did not cry. She just stood there, with her hand on her grandmother's name, and she felt something move through her that was older than grief and quieter than joy. She felt called. Behind her, Jonah's small voice came from the cave mouth. "Mama, is it okay in there?" She opened her eyes. She picked up the lantern. She turned around. He was standing in the entrance with his bundle still under his arm. The afternoon light behind him made him look like he was framed in gold. "Yes, baby," she said. Her voice was steady. "Yes, it's okay in here." She walked back toward the entrance, toward her son, toward the work that was waiting for her. She had 20 days now until winter. She had a notebook. She had a cave. She had a boy. She had a grandmother who had been there before her, and had survived it, and had left a record so that another woman in another century would know it could be done. She had been given a wound, and she had decided to receive it as a foundation. She turned to her son. "Jonah." "Yes, Mama." "Help me bring the cart up. We have work to do before dark." He nodded. He set down his bundle, and the two of them walked back to the cart. The wind came down off the cliff and curled around them. It did not knock them over. It did not even slow them down. It just passed through, the way wind passes through a place that was always going to hold. The first night in the cave, Adelaide did not sleep. She sat with her back against the stone wall, lantern low, Jonah asleep on the wool blanket beside her, his breath even, his small hand still holding one of the gray creek stones. The cave was colder than she had expected, colder than she had prepared for. She pulled her shawl tighter and opened the notebook on her lap. Esme's handwriting moved across the page like water finding a path through gravel. Floor first, always floor first. Wind comes under, not over. A floor of packed clay over flat stones will hold heat better than wood. Lay the stones with the flat side up. Pack the clay between. Let it dry one full day before you stand on it. Adelaide read it twice. She closed her eyes. She tried to picture the work, stone by stone, the way her grandmother must have done it, a woman alone, in 1849, running from a man she could not stay married to, 12 years younger than Adelaide was now, and she had wintered in this cave and lived to walk back out. Adelaide opened her eyes. She picked up the lantern. She walked to the back wall. She placed her hand on the carved letters again. E.H. "Grandma," she whispered. She did not finish the sentence. She did not know what came after the word. She just stood there, hand on stone, the light flickering on 29-year-old letters. Then she went back to her son. She lay down beside him. She slept. Morning came gray and slow. Adelaide woke before Jonah. She lit the small fire she had built at the cave entrance the night before. She heated water in the cast-iron pot. She broke a piece of dried meat in half. Then she stepped outside. She wanted to see the land in daylight, properly, the way her grandmother would have seen it. The cliff face rose above her, higher than she had registered yesterday. The granite caught the morning light and held it, the way some stones do, not reflecting, not absorbing, holding. The creek ran 40 yards from the cave mouth, clean, loud, cold. She walked to it. She knelt down. She cupped her hands and tasted the water. It was sound. Her grandmother had taught her how to taste water. Smell first. Then a small sip. Then watch how it moved against the rocks. A creek that hurried over its bed without curling back on itself was a creek you could drink from. Adelaide stood up. She looked back at the cave. Smoke from her small fire was curling up through a fissure in the rock above the entrance. She had not noticed the fissure last night. It ran up the cliff face for maybe 20 feet before it disappeared into the granite. The smoke was rising through it. Steady, going up, not pooling. A natural chimney. Esme had written about that. Fissure in the ceiling pulls the smoke. Adelaide stood by the creek and laughed. A short sound. Surprised by itself. Because she understood now. Because everything her grandmother had written was real. Because the cave had not been chosen at random. Because Esme had picked it. She had walked the valley alone. She had found the one place a woman could survive a winter. She had marked it. She had kept the secret. And she had written it down for the granddaughter she would not live to see grown. Adelaide wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She had work to do. Jonah woke up at the smell of the fire. He sat up on the blanket, rubbed his eyes, looked around the cave like he was making sure it was still real. "Mama, I'm right here. Is this our home now?" She sat down beside him. She handed him the half-piece of dried meat and a tin cup of warm water. For the winter, yes. He nodded. He chewed slowly. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. Did great-grandma live here? Adelaide stared at him. Why would you ask that, baby? He shrugged. The way 6-year-olds shrug when an adult asks them to explain something they understood without explaining. Last night, you said her name, while I was almost asleep. She had not known he heard her. She had not known he was awake. She had not known her son spent his hours filing away the things she said when she thought he could not hear. Yes, she said. She did. A long time ago, before I was born. There are her letters on the wall in the back, carved into the stone. Jonah's eyes got wide. Can I see? She brought him the lantern. He walked to the back wall. He held the lantern up. He stood on his toes. He read the letters. E-H. He turned around. E for Esme. Yes. H for Halloran. Yes, like you, Halloran, before you got married. She had not realized he knew that. That's right, baby. He put his small hand on the letters, just like she had. He closed his eyes. Then he opened them and said very seriously, She knew we were coming. Adelaide could not speak. She could only nod. Jonah handed the lantern back to her. He walked to the bundle he had brought from home. He unwrapped it. He pulled out a small piece of charcoal. He came back to the wall. He looked at her, asking permission. She nodded. He drew, very carefully, beneath his great-grandmother's letters. A-V-J-V. Adelaide Voss. Jonah Voss. 3 generations on a wall in a cave that no one in the town below had ever entered. Adelaide put her hand over her mouth. She did not cry, but it was close. Jonah stepped back. He looked at his work. He nodded once, like a man approving the framing of a house he had built with his own hands. Then he asked, What do we do today, Mama? She wiped her eyes. Today we build a floor. 6 weeks. That was how long it took. 6 weeks to make the cave into something that could be called a home. Not a metaphor, a real one, with a floor, a door, a fire that drew correctly, a place to sleep that did not freeze them at night. Adelaide did it alone. She had no husband. She had no brother. She had no neighbor close enough to call. She had a 6-year-old boy and a notebook, and her own 2 hands and the memory of a grandmother who had done it once before. She woke before dawn every morning. She built the floor stone by stone the way Esme had described. Flat side up, clay between. She mixed the clay with water from the creek. She packed it with her bare fingers. By the 2nd day her hands had cracked. By the 4th day they bled. By the 7th day they had grown a layer of skin she did not recognize as her own. She found cottonwood logs along the creek, dead, dry, straight grain. She had never made a door before. She read the notebook. Scribe the frame to the rock. Don't fight the cave. The cave is older than your tools. Make the door fit the cave, not the cave fit the door. Adelaide read that line 3 times. Then she did what her grandmother said. She used the hatchet to shape the cottonwood. She used a piece of charred stick to mark where the rock pushed in. She trimmed. She fitted. She trimmed again. Her shoulders ached. Her wrists cramped. By the end of the 1st week, the door frame was standing, wedged into place. Not perfect, but it was holding. The hinges came from Hollis Peterson. He had hidden them in the bottom of the flour sack he had given her the night before she left. 3 iron hinges, a hand-forged latch, a wooden handle. She had not known until she emptied the sack on the 3rd day in the cave. She had sat down on the cave floor and cried. She had cried for 10 minutes, the kind of crying that does not make sound, the kind that just leaks out of a body that has been holding too much for too long. Hollis Peterson, 40-something, widower, wheat farmer, who had not asked her for anything in 3 years, who had loaded her cart and given her flour and slipped 3 iron hinges into the bottom of the sack and said nothing about it. She had thought, that morning, sitting on the cave floor with the hinges in her lap, there are still good men in the world. I had almost forgotten. Then she had stood up, wiped her face, and gone back to work. Jonah was not a child anymore. Not in the way other 6-year-olds were children. He had become her partner. He carried small stones up from the creek bed. He stacked the firewood by size. He learned to identify 3 plants by their leaves and could tell her which ones could be eaten and which ones could be steeped. He sat at his charcoal slab and practiced his letters in the afternoons while she worked on the door. He asked questions, hard ones. Mama, why did Uncle Cyrus hate us? He didn't hate us, baby. He just didn't understand us. What's the difference? She paused, the hatchet in her hand, the afternoon light coming through the cave entrance. Hate is a feeling. Misunderstanding is a habit. People can change a habit. They usually don't change a feeling. He thought about that. Mama. Yes. Does Daddy hate us or misunderstand us? She put the hatchet down. She knelt in front of her son. Your daddy doesn't hate you. Your daddy doesn't even know you. That's a different thing. Why doesn't he know me? Because knowing somebody takes time, and he didn't want to spend his time that way. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'd rather be known than hated. Adelaide pulled him into her arms. She held the back of his head with one hand. She felt his hair against her cheek. She breathed him in. Me too, baby. Me too. The fire took 4 days to build. Adelaide read the notebook. She studied the diagrams Esme had drawn. She tested the draft. She moved the firebox 3 times before she got it right. She built it low, wide. The flue narrow and angled toward the natural fissure in the ceiling. She mortared the river rocks together with clay and dried grass. She let it dry 1 full day before she lit the first fire in it. When the fire caught, the smoke went up through the firebox, up the angled flue, up the fissure, out into the October sky, the cave filled with warmth. Not the brutal warmth of an overheated room, the steady, bone-level warmth of a space that had been thought through. Adelaide sat back on her heels. She looked at her work. She looked at her son. He was sitting cross-legged near the fire. His face glowed orange. His eyes were closed. He was smiling. She had not seen him smile like that in 3 years, not since before the divorce. Not since the morning his father had walked out the front door for the last time. Adelaide pressed her hand to her chest. She thought, I built this. I built this with my own hands. I built this for him. I built this for me. The first visitor came on a Wednesday afternoon in early November. Adelaide saw him before he moved. A stillness among the bare aspens at the tree line. The particular stillness of a person trying to determine whether a situation was safe. A man in a buckskin coat worn to the texture of old bark. A long rifle carried with the ease of long habit. A single mule behind him, loaded but not heavily. He stood at the edge of the trees and watched the cave for perhaps 5 minutes without moving. Adelaide kept working. She was outside on a flat stone, pounding dried buffalo berries into paste with a smooth river rock. Her motions were rhythmic, calm. Her grandmother had taught her that panicked people invite panic toward them. Calm people invite a different quality of attention. Jonah was beside her, very still, in his particular way, watching the tree line. The man finally walked toward them. His steps were measured, even, stopping at what felt like a considered distance, not so far as to seem timid, not so close as to be presumptuous. His face was weathered, sun-creased. He was perhaps 58 years old. Hard to tell exactly. The kind of man whose age you could only guess by the depth of the lines and the slight slowness in his gait. Linus Hobart, he said, like a statement of something already established, the way people who spend time alone reintroduce themselves to the human world. Not as an introduction, as a reminder. He took in the woodpile. The door frame Adelaide had fitted, the shelves visible through the open doorway with their clay jars ranked in order of size, the garden terrace with its cleared stalks. His expression did not change, but something in it moved. What moved through Linus Hobart's face was recognition. Adelaide kept pounding the berries. He did not speak for almost a minute. Then he said, "Folks in town are saying Halloran left you nothing but a hole in the ground." She did not look up. "We have what we need." He nodded. Slowly, he looked up at the cliff face above them, tracing something in the pattern of the rock that Adelaide had not yet learned to read. "This valley funnels the north wind," he said, "to the air between them, rather than to either of them specifically. When the real snow comes, it doesn't fall straight. It drifts, piles against anything standing. I've seen it cover a 2-story barn to the roof line." His gaze came back down. It settled on the cave entrance. Something shifted in his face. A faint recalibration, the adjustment of a prediction. A hole in the ground isn't the worst place to be in a blizzard. He did not say it like a compliment. He said it like a fact a man corrects himself on. Then he walked to the back wall of the cave. She had not invited him in. She did not stop him. He stood in front of the carved letters for a long time, his back to her, his hat in his hand. When he turned around, his face had changed. It was the face of a man who had just remembered something he had forgotten for 40 years. "Esme Halloran," he said. Adelaide put down the river rock. "Yes, your grandmother. Yes, I knew her." The air in the cave changed. Adelaide stood up. Linus Hobart looked at her, then at Jonah, then at the carved letters again. "I was a boy," he said, 12 years old. Winter of 1838. My father had died on the trail west. My mother and I were trying to get to her sister in the Oregon Territory. We got caught in an early snow. My mother went into the cold to find help and didn't come back. I crawled into this cave to die." He paused. "Your grandmother was passing through. Years before she carved those letters, she found me. I'd been in here 3 days, I think. I don't remember much. I remember the smell of cornbread on a hearthstone. I remember a woman with brown hair and a calm voice telling me I was going to live." Adelaide did not move. "She fed me for 2 weeks. She walked me down to the South Trail and put me on a wagon heading toward the territory. I never saw her again." He paused. "But I never forgot." His eyes were wet. She had not expected that. "She said something to me before she sent me on my way," Linus said. "I never forgot it. I have repeated it to myself for 40 years. Adelaide waited. Linus said, "She told me. Some things are given as wounds. Some things are received as foundations. The difference is in the receiver. The cave was silent. Adelaide felt tears running down her face. She did not wipe them. Jonah looked up at her. Then at Linus. He said, "Mama writes that down sometimes." Linus looked at the boy. He nodded, slowly, once. "I expect she does." He walked to his mule. He unstrapped a smoked ham. He set it on the flat stone where Adelaide had been working. "Trade you for potatoes when they're ready in the spring." It was not charity. It was not pity. It was a transaction between people who would be sharing a winter in the same general geography. It was the first time since the reading of her uncle's will that anyone had spoken to her as though she were simply a neighbor. Adelaide could not speak. She only nodded. Linus turned to go. At the tree line he stopped. He looked back. "Miss Voss." "Yes, your grandmother." She had a way of standing. When she was thinking, she'd put one hand on her hip and tip her head sideways like she was listening to something nobody else could hear. Adelaide felt her breath catch. She had been told she did that. As a child, her mother had said it. "Esme does that. You do that. You're going to be just like her." "I see her in you," Linus said. "I just wanted to say so." He left. The mule followed without being led. Adelaide stood in the entrance of the cave for a long time after they were gone. She watched the aspens close behind him. She watched the smoke from her fire rise up through the fissure. Jonah leaned against her side. "Mama." "Yes, baby." He cried. "Yes. Old men don't usually cry." "No, baby, they don't. It was about great-grandma. Yes. She kept him alive. Yes. And now she's keeping us alive, too." Adelaide bent down. She kissed the top of his head. "Yes, sweetheart, she is." Mortimer Thorne came on horseback the following Tuesday. Adelaide saw him before he saw her. She was outside, gathering the last of the buffalo berry stalks to dry. She heard the hooves on the trail before he came into view. She straightened up. She wiped her hands on her apron. She did not move from where she was standing. Mortimer rounded the curve of the trail. He was riding his bay gelding, polished saddle, coat in dark wool. The same coat she had seen him in at his office. He was on his way to the new storage barn he was overseeing at the north end of the valley. The barn with the soaring roofline. The milled lumber hauled in at considerable expense. He slowed his horse as he passed the cave. He looked up. He took in the woodpile, the smoke rising from the rock face. The garden terrace cleared and tidy. His expression was the one she had expected. The small, superior smile of a man who has made his assessment and found it confirmed his prior conclusions. He shook his head once, a barely perceptible movement. He touched his heels to the gelding's flanks. The horse moved on. Mortimer Thorne did not speak to her. He did not greet her. He did not ask after her son. He just rode by. Adelaide watched him until he disappeared around the trail's curve. Then she turned back to her work. She thought, very calmly, "He is building something to be seen. We are building something to last." She picked up another stalk of buffalo berry. She continued. Jonah came out of the cave. He had a piece of charcoal in his hand. He had been practicing his letters. "Mama, was that the lawyer?" "Yes, baby." "He didn't say hello." "No, that's rude." "Yes." "Why was he rude?" She knelt down. She put both hands on his shoulders. "Some people, baby, when they see a person they don't approve of, they decide that person isn't worth their words. So they don't give them any words at all. They think it's a punishment." "Is it a punishment?" "Only if you wanted his words." Jonah considered that. "I don't want his words." "Me either, baby." Then it's not a punishment. That's right. He nodded. He went back inside. She stood up. She looked at the trail where Mortimer had disappeared. She thought about her Uncle Cyrus, the will, the two fingers pushing the deed across the desk, Garrett Halloran in the corner with his arms crossed, the Reverend Holt at the church door telling her to repent. She thought about her grandmother, alone, in this cave, in 1849, hiding from a man who would have dragged her back if he had known. She thought, "We are made of the same stone, Grandma. We are made of the same stone." The sickness came at the end of November. Jonah started coughing on a Tuesday afternoon. By Tuesday night his forehead was hot. By Wednesday morning, the small mercury thermometer Adelaide had brought from the kitchen drawer at the rented house read 104 degrees. 104. Adelaide had never seen a fever that high. She had seen 101 when he was 3. The croup. She had nursed him through it. She had been terrified. This was different. His eyes were glassy. His skin was so hot it hurt to touch. He was breathing fast and shallow. His small hands were slack. She put him on the pallet near the fire. She put a wet cloth on his forehead. She panicked for about 40 seconds. She panicked the way a mother panics when her only child is suddenly very ill in a cave, 20 miles from a doctor in early winter, and she is alone. She paced. She paced to the cave entrance and back. She put both hands on her face. She thought, "I can't do this. I can't. I made a mistake. I should have stayed in town. I should have taken the offer. I should have—" Then she stopped. She breathed. She walked to the back wall. She put her hand on her grandmother's letters. She closed her eyes. She said out loud into the cold cave, "Lord, I'm not asking for ease. I'm asking for time. Time to make this work. Time to keep my boy." She opened her eyes. She walked to the notebook. She turned to the page she had marked weeks ago, the one Linus Hobart had reminded her of without knowing. Yerba Santa. Resinous leaves, deep green, small yellow flowers in summer, found on rocky slopes facing south. For the cough, for the lungs. Steep 1 full handful in 2 cups of boiling water for 20 minutes. Strain. Sweeten with 1 spoon of honey if you have it. Give 3 swallows every 2 hours. Don't stop until the fever breaks. Below that, in the margin, in her grandmother's smaller hand. Cool the body too. The medicine works from inside. Cool water from the creek, in cloths, on the wrists, on the neck, on the soles of the feet. Every 2 hours alongside the tea. The fever has to leave through the skin. Adelaide had collected the yerba santa leaves in October. She had a jar of them on the shelf. She took it down. Her hands shook. She measured a full handful. She poured boiling water from the cast-iron pot. She let it steep. She watched the clock she had brought from the kitchen. 20 minutes, 20 of the longest minutes of her life. While she waited, she went to the creek. She filled a small bowl with cold water. She tore strips from a clean cotton shirt. She came back. She knelt beside Jonah. She wet the cloths. She wrung them out. She wrapped one around his small wrist, one around his other wrist, one folded across the back of his neck, one on the soles of his feet. The first cloth went warm in her hand within a minute. She replaced it. Then the next. Then the next. She rotated them. She kept them cool. Jonah moaned on the pallet. She knelt beside him. She wiped his forehead. She whispered things she would not remember later. When the tea was ready, she strained it into a tin cup. She lifted his head. She tipped 3 swallows into his mouth. He swallowed. Slowly. His eyes fluttered. "Mama, I'm here, baby. I'm right here. It tastes bad. I know. Don't go. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." She did not leave his side. She gave him 3 swallows of tea every 2 hours. She rotated the cool cloths every 15 minutes. She kept the fire steady. She watched the rise and fall of his small chest. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She did not pray again. She did not need to. At 3 in the morning, his fever broke. She felt it before she saw it. The skin under her hand changed temperature. Slowly, then all at once. The sweat came. Heavy, soaking through his nightshirt. She changed him into a dry shirt. She wiped him down with a cool cloth one last time. She put a fresh blanket over him. He opened his eyes at 4 in the morning. "Mama." "Yes. Did great-grandma teach you how to make the medicine?" She nodded. She could not speak. He smiled. A small smile. Tired, but real. "She's a good teacher, Mama." He fell back asleep. Adelaide sat beside him on the cave floor. She put her face in her hands. She wept, the kind of weeping a woman does when she has held something tightly for a long time, and now she does not have to any more. She wept for her grandmother. She wept for the boy on the pallet. She wept for the woman she had been 3 years ago, when her husband had drunk himself into a rage 1 too many times. She wept for the woman she was now, who had just kept her child alive in a cave with nothing but a notebook, and a jar of leaves and a prayer. She wept until she was empty. Then she stood up. She added a piece of hardwood to the fire. She sat back down beside her son. She watched him sleep. She thought, "I am not alone. I have never been alone. I have my grandmother. I have my son. I have my own 2 hands. That is not nothing. That is perhaps everything." Linus Hobart returned in the first week of December. He did not dismount from his mule. He stopped at the tree line. He looked at the sky above the northern ridge. The flat metallic sheen had deepened. The blade had become something more committed, a color Adelaide now understood as preparation. 5 days, Linus said. Maybe 4. I've been up along the ridges 3 days out. Big system building. Bigger than anything I've read in this valley since '56. She nodded. "It won't be a snowstorm," he said. "It'll be something else. How long will it last?" He did not look away from the northern sky. A week, could be more. Pressure signatures on a system this size, they don't behave like the smaller ones. They stall. He looked down at her. "You've done well. Now do more. Double the wood. Seal the door tighter. When it hits, don't open the door until you've had 2 full days of silence after the wind dies." She nodded. "Why 2 days? Snow settles and hardens. A door opened too soon into a packed drift does 2 things. Lets your heat out, and sometimes the drift behind it holds the door shut when you try to close it again. You'd be giving up a closed cave for an open one. Don't make that trade." He looked at Jonah, who had come to stand in the cave entrance. "Boy?" "Yes, sir." "Your mother knows what she's doing. You pay attention to her the way you're paying attention right now, you'll be fine." Jonah nodded. Linus turned the mule and rode back the way he had come. He did not look back. That night, Jonah stood beside Adelaide at the cave entrance. The sky above the northern ridge was the color her grandmother had described. The sky was taking a breath. Jonah said, "Mama, yes, what can I do?" She looked down at him. He was still pale from the fever. He had lost weight in the week of his sickness. His small face was thinner, but his eyes were steady. His eyes were the eyes of a partner. She knelt down. She held his shoulders. "You can help me count the jars. You can help me pack moss into the door seams. You can help me carry the smaller wood. You can help me check the stores every morning and tell me what we have. You can help me by doing what I ask and not asking why until later when there's time." He nodded. "I can do that. I know you can." "Mama, yes. We're going to be okay. Yes, baby. Because great-grandma is here." She pulled him into her arms. She closed her eyes. She said yes, she is. Behind her, the cave glowed with low orange light. Inside, on the back wall, 3 sets of letters waited. E.H. 1849. A V.J.V. 3 generations of Halloran women, 3 generations of stone. The wind had not yet come, but it was coming, and they were ready. Or they would be, in 4 days, or 5. Adelaide stood up. She took her son's hand. She walked back into the cave to begin the final preparations. Behind her, the sky finished taking its breath, and somewhere beyond the northern ridge, the storm of the century began to gather itself for its long descent into the valley. The wind came on the 4th night, not gradually, all at once. Adelaide had been awake. She had been awake most of the night, mending a wool sock by the firelight, listening for what she knew was coming. And then it came. A pressure first, felt before heard. The cave air compressed slightly. Her ears clicked. The fire leaned sideways for one strange moment and then righted itself. Then the sound. Low, a roll of something far away, like a freight train on the tracks she could not see. It rose. It kept rising. It passed through registers that did not have names. It became a thing the body felt rather than the ear heard. A vibration in her chest, a pressure against the door. Jonah sat up on his pallet. He did not cry out. He did not call her name. He just stood up, walked across the cave floor, and sat down beside her without a word. She put her arm around him. He leaned into her side. Outside, the storm announced itself. It was not a snowstorm. Linus had been right. It was something else. For 7 days, they did not see the sky. For 7 days, they did not open the door. For 7 days, the world was reduced to a stone room, a fire, a boy, a woman, and a cave. The sound never stopped. It changed. It rose. It fell. It found new pitches and exhausted them. It built walls of air that pressed against the door and then released. It made the firelight tremble. It made the jars on the shelf vibrate so faintly that Adelaide had to put her hand against one to be sure she was not imagining it. But it never stopped. Adelaide kept the fire low. She fed it the way a nurse feeds a patient. Small portions, carefully timed, hardwood only, slow burn. She had stacked enough wood for 10 days of heavy use. She was now planning for 14. She kept a schedule in her head. She woke at the same hour each day. She heated water. She measured out food. She wrote in the notebook in the afternoons. She taught Jonah for 2 hours every morning and 1 hour every evening. Plants, numbers. How to read a fire for information about wood quality. How to pace yourself when you have a long task and limited strength. How to sit still when sitting still is the only thing you can do. Jonah absorbed all of it. He did not complain. He did not ask when it would be over. He had learned, somewhere in the months since they had walked into the cave, that asking for something to end before it was ready to end was a waste of breath. On the fourth day of the storm, Adelaide caught him standing at the back wall. He was alone. He was holding the lantern with both hands. He was talking. She paused at the edge of the firelight. She did not interrupt. She listened. He was not loud. His voice was small and even. He was speaking to the carved letters. And the fever broke, he was saying. Mama gave me 3 swallows every 2 hours, the way you wrote it. She didn't sleep, not even 1 minute. I saw her not sleep. She looked tired, but she didn't say. She doesn't like to say. He paused. He listened, as if the wall were responding. And the door fits real good now. There's no light at the edges. Mama checked. Another pause. She's still scared sometimes. I know because she puts her hand on her chest. Like this. He demonstrated, with one small palm flat against his sternum. That means scared. But she doesn't say. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said very seriously, "Thank you for teaching her, great-grandma. She's a good student." He set the lantern down. He walked back toward the fire. He saw his mother standing in the shadow. He did not look surprised. He just took her hand. He led her back to the fire. He did not say what he had been doing. She did not ask. Some things in a child's life belong only to the child. She knew that. She had known it since the day she became a mother. On the 5th night, the smoke stopped going up. Adelaide noticed it at the same time she noticed her chest getting tight. The fire had been burning steady. The flue had been drawing well. And then, sometime in the late evening, it had stopped. The cave began to fill. Not heavily, a faint haze, settling along the ceiling, sliding lower. Jonah coughed. Adelaide stood up so fast she dropped the notebook. She knew what had happened. The fissure, the natural chimney that ran up through the rock. The fissure her grandmother had known about. The fissure that had pulled the smoke for weeks. The top of it had iced over. Snow had piled deep on the cliff face. The fissure ran up into that snow. The exit hole at the top of the cliff had frozen solid under days of accumulating drift. And now the smoke had nowhere to go. She looked at the fire. She looked at the door. She looked at her son. She had 2 choices. She could put the fire out, save them from suffocating, and let the temperature in the cave fall to the temperature of a granite tomb in mid-December, which would kill them in a different way, slower, colder, or she could climb up through the fissure, from the inside, break the ice at the top, 20 feet up, through a crack in the rock that was 4 inches wide at its narrowest point, alone, in a storm, with the 6-year-old waiting below. She closed her eyes. She thought, just for a second. She thought, I cannot do this. Then she thought, yes, I can. Because there is no one else. Because Jonah is 6 years old. Because the only person on this earth who can climb that fissure is the woman standing in front of it. So she will. She told Jonah what she was going to do. She kept her voice flat. She kept her hands steady. She explained it the way she would explain the weather, or the dinner menu, or the location of the spare blankets. She tied a length of cord around her waist. She fixed the other end to a heavy stone near the firebox. The cord was 40 feet long. It would not stop her if she fell. But it would tell Jonah where she was if she went still. She put on her thickest coat. She put on her grandmother's gloves. She had found them in the pocket of the coat the 2nd week in the cave. Esme's gloves, brown leather, worn smooth, a little big on Adelaide's hands. She thought, putting them on, I am going to break ice with my grandmother's gloves. She handed the notebook to Jonah. He took it with both hands, the way she had taught him. Jonah, yes, Mama, if something happens, if I do not come back down. Mama, listen to me, baby. If I do not come back down, you wait by the fire. You keep it small. You eat one piece of pemmican every 6 hours. You drink water from the creek jug. You wait. Mr. Hobart will come. He told me he would come after 2 days of silence. Mama, you give him this notebook. You tell him it was Esme's. You tell him I said he should help you. Mama, what? His small face was very white in the firelight, but his eyes were dry. You're coming back down. She stopped. She looked at him. Yes, baby, I am. I just had to tell you the other thing in case I didn't. You are? Yes. Say it. I'm coming back down. Good. He sat by the fire with the notebook on his lap. He folded his hands on top of the cover. He did not move. The fissure ran up the back wall of the cave. It started low, about chest height. It widened slightly at the entrance, then narrowed sharply about 6 feet up, then opened slightly again, then narrowed. The whole climb was a series of expansions and constrictions that her grandmother had probably mapped in her head and never written down, because writing it down would have implied she expected another woman to climb it. But here Adelaide was. She wedged her boot into the first opening. She reached up with her right hand. She found a handhold. She pulled. The cold of the stone went through Esme's gloves into her palms. She climbed. It was not climbing the way men climb mountains. It was climbing the way a woman climbs the inside of a chimney. Back against one wall, knees and feet pressed against the other, inching up by alternating pressure. She had read about it in the notebook. The body is its own ladder. The cave will hold you if you let it. She let it. She inched up. The fire below her got smaller. 6 feet, 8, 10. The fissure narrowed. She had to turn her shoulders sideways. She had to push the air out of her lungs to fit through the tight place. She pushed the air out. She slid through. 12 feet, 15. Her arms started to shake. Her thighs started to cramp. She thought about stopping. She did not stop. She thought, if I stop here, I freeze. If I freeze here, Jonah is alone. If Jonah is alone, then everything I built in this cave was for nothing. Then everything my grandmother built in this cave was for nothing. That cannot be true. So I cannot stop. She did not stop. 18 feet. 19. She reached the top. The fissure ended in a domed pocket of rock. Above the dome was a hole the size of her hand. The hole was sealed. Sealed by ice. Sealed by snow. Sealed by drift packed so dense it was no longer drift. It was something between snow and stone. She braced her body against the walls. She pulled the stick from her belt, a short hardwood rod. She had cut it that morning. She drove it upward into the ice. Once, twice. A small chip fell on her face. She drove again, again. Her arm screamed, her shoulder cramped. She switched hands. She drove again. A piece of ice the size of an apple broke loose and fell past her ear. She drove again, a larger piece. Then, a sound, a small, clean popping sound. A circle of cold air dropped down onto her face. The plug had broken. A column of fresh air poured down through the fissure. Adelaide gasped. She had not realized she had been breathing shallow for the last 5 minutes. The air down in the cave had been thinner than she had wanted to admit. She drove the stick again, wider. She broke off more ice. She made the hole the size of 2 fists, then 3. Wind whistled down through it, cold, clean, the kind of cold that hurts the lungs. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever felt. She rested her forehead against the rock. She breathed. Then she began the descent. Going down was harder than going up. She had used everything she had to get up. Now she had to use what was left. She lowered herself inch by inch, boot first, then hand, then shoulder. The cord at her waist trailed below her. She could see the firelight again, faint at first, then brighter. She slipped once, about 10 feet from the bottom. Her left foot lost its grip and her body dropped 6 inches before her elbow caught a ledge. Her shoulder wrenched. She heard herself make a sound, a small cry. She heard from below Jonah's voice, "Mama, I'm okay. Mama, I'm okay, baby. I just slipped. I'm coming down." She braced. She breathed. She kept going. When her boots touched the cave floor, her legs gave out and she sat down hard. Jonah dropped the notebook. He ran across the cave. He hit her so hard she fell backward onto her elbows. He wrapped his arms around her neck. He cried. He had not cried during the fever. He had not cried when his father left. He had not cried during the storm. He cried now. She held him. She rocked him. She felt the wet of his face against her collarbone. "You came back," he said. "I came back. You said you would. I did. You came back. I came back, baby. I came back." She did not remember falling asleep. She woke an hour later, still on the cave floor, her son curled against her side, the fire burning a little brighter than she had left it. He had fed it while she slept. She looked at the firebox. He had used the smaller hardwood pieces, the ones she had taught him to use. He had done it correctly. Adelaide laid her head back down. She closed her eyes. She slept. On the 7th day, the storm ended. It did not taper. It did not soften. It stopped. Adelaide had been awake, mending the cuff of Jonah's shirt by the fire. Her hands had become so steady from the work of the last weeks that she had forgotten what unsteady hands felt like. And then the wind stopped, the way a breath stops. The cave went quiet. So quiet that for a moment Adelaide thought she had gone deaf. She set down the shirt. She listened. There was nothing to listen to. Jonah sat up on his pallet, his eyes wide. "Mama, I know." It stopped. "I know. Is it over?" She thought about Linus. She thought about 2 days of silence. "We wait, baby." He nodded. He did not ask for how long. He had already learned. They waited. For 2 days. They cooked from the hearth. They mended what needed mending. They studied the back wall together. Jonah added something to his great-grandmother's letters. A small drawing, 3 figures, a woman, a boy, and, between them, holding their hands, a 3rd figure, older, wearing something like a long coat. He did not say who the 3rd figure was. He did not need to. Adelaide looked at it for a long time. She did not erase it. She did not correct it. She just looked, and she thought, "This is the truest picture I have ever seen." On the 3rd morning of silence, Adelaide opened the door. She did it carefully. She used the hatchet first. To break the ice that had crusted the seal, she worked from the inside. She broke the top corner first, the way Linus had told her. Snow came in, not powder, the dense, packed material of a drift that had compressed under its own weight. It fell onto the cave floor with a heaviness that made Jonah's eyes go wide, and then narrow, with something that looked, in a 6-year-old, remarkably like determination. The wall of snow visible through the opening was not white. It was blue-white, the color of compressed depth, and it offered no sky, no light, just the faint luminescence of ice crystals holding what little light had filtered down through feet of drift. Adelaide started digging. She worked at an angle, up, diagonal, following the path of least resistance toward where she thought the surface might be. She traded with Jonah every 3 minutes. He moved snow from the tunnel mouth into the cold storage at the back of the cave. Trip after trip, his small arms full, his face determined. The first hour was the hardest. The drift was so packed it was closer to ice than snow. Each shovel load required real force to break free. Adelaide thought of nothing except the next load, then the next, then the next. Her grandmother had written about this once, in the notebook. When the problem is too large to be useful, make the problem the size of your hands, the size of 3 minutes, the size of the snow in front of your face right now. You don't dig out of a buried life. You move this load, then the next. She moved this load, then the next. In the 4th hour, the shovel broke through. Not dramatically. A small hole appeared in the snow above her, the size of a fist. A shaft of light came down through it, white. After 7 days of firelight, so bright Adelaide had to shield her eyes, she heard behind her Jonah make a sound, not a cry, not a laugh. A sound the body makes when it receives something it has been without long enough to understand its value. She widened the hole. She worked it bigger, bigger, big enough for a body to climb through. She wanted to go first, before Jonah, to make sure the surface was safe. She climbed up. She emerged into a world that bore no relationship to the one she had last seen. The valley was gone. In its place was a sculpted white landscape. Drifts shaped like waves caught mid-collapse. The snow surface hard enough to walk on. The sky above was a blue of extraordinary clarity, the kind of blue that only appears after a major weather system has scoured the air of everything that is not itself. Adelaide stood on the surface of the drift. She looked back at where the cave should have been. She could not see it. A massive bank of consolidated snow rose halfway up the cliff face, smooth, solid, as if the valley had always contained this slope. She was standing on the roof of her home. The thought made her dizzy. She helped Jonah up through the hole. He emerged into the bright cold and stopped. He stood beside her on the snow. He looked out across the valley. His expression was not the complex disorientation of an adult. It was the simple, pure data gathering of a child encountering something genuinely new. He bent down. He picked up a small gray stone that had been deposited on the surface of the drift by some action of the storm. Smooth, oval, the same size and color as the one he had given her in October. He placed it in her hand without looking at her face. She felt the weight of 2 stones in her pocket now. One from autumn, one from winter. The valley had bookended a season. The walk to the settlement took 3 hours for 2 miles. They knew the route from before, but the route had changed. Snow had erased the trail. The fence posts along the way emerged from the drifts at unfamiliar heights. The settlement came into view as a collection of smoke sources and exposed roof lines, some of them complete, some of them not. Adelaide stopped at the rise above the town. She looked. She counted. 7 houses with sound roofs, 4 with broken ridge lines, 3 completely collapsed. The church had lost its bell tower, the new bell tower, the one Cyrus Halloran had paid for, the one that had been fundraised across 3 counties, the one that was supposed to bear his name on a bronze plaque for 100 years. It had snapped at the base. It was lying across the churchyard like a felled tree. The brass bell had rolled 20 feet and stopped against a fence. Adelaide looked at it for a long moment. She thought, "Stone breaks no promises, towers do." She walked into the settlement. The first person they met was Hollis Peterson. He was at the edge of what had been the livery stable, his shovel planted in the snow beside him. His face had a hollowness to it she did not recognize at first. The hollowness of a man who had spent a week speaking to neighbors about the dead and the missing, and was still doing the inventory. He saw them coming across the snow. He went very still. She understood, watching his face, that he had not expected to see them. Not this morning, not walking under their own power, not the 2 of them with color in their faces. His voice, when it came, had the rawness of someone who had been speaking to too many people about hard things for too many days in a row. "Adelaide, Hollis, we thought—" He stopped. "What? We thought you were gone." She looked at him. She did not know what to say. She said, "We were in the cave." Hollis stared at her. For a long moment he did not move. Then he stepped forward. He pulled her into a hug. It was not a romantic hug. It was not even a familiar one. It was the hug of a man who had been told a friend was dead and was now finding out that the friend was not. He let her go fast. He cleared his throat. He looked at Jonah. "Boy, sir, you took care of your mother. She took care of me. I'll bet you both took care of each other." Jonah considered this. "Yes, sir." Hollis nodded. He said, 12 people. 12, Adelaide. And we're still finding." She closed her eyes. She did not need names yet. She did not need details. She just needed a moment. Hollis gave her one. Then she said, "What can I do?" Hollis smiled faintly for the first time. "You always ask that question first. You know that." "What can I do?" "Come help me dig out the Whitfield place. Their boy is missing." She nodded. She handed Hollis a cloth bundle from her bag. Pemmican. The dense kind. The kind she had made for an extended winter. "Share this with the people who need it. You'll know better than I do." He took the bundle with both hands, the way Jonah had been taught to take things that mattered. He nodded. "Adelaide." "Yes. Mortimer Thorne is still alive." She did not respond. Hollis said, "His wife isn't." She closed her eyes. She had not liked Mortimer. She had not liked him at all. But she closed her eyes anyway. She found him later that afternoon. He was sitting on a wooden chair that someone had placed outside the ruins of his house. The house had lost half its roof. The east wing had collapsed entirely. A blanket was wrapped around his shoulders. It was not his blanket. It was a borrowed one. His polished boots were ruined. His expensive coat was gone. He was wearing a work jacket that was 2 sizes too big for him. His hands rested on his knees. He looked, Adelaide thought, like a man whose scaffolding had been removed and who was discovering what remained when it was gone. He saw her coming across the snow. He did not stand. He did not speak. He just watched. Adelaide stopped about 10 feet away. She did not approach further. She looked at him. He looked at her. His eyes moved across her face, the clarity in it, the color, the evidence of a person who had been fed and warm for the duration of what he had endured, uncovered and diminished. Then his eyes moved to Jonah, standing beside her, healthy, 6 years old, holding her hand. A small calculation moved behind Mortimer's face. It was visible because he no longer had the resources to hide it. He was adding something up, and the sum he was arriving at was a sum that contradicted everything he had told the town about her. He tried to speak. What came out was not words, a dry, compressed sound. He put his head down. Adelaide did not say a word. She did not need to. She had brought no words for him. She did not have any to spare. She turned to Jonah. "Come on, baby." He came. They walked away. Linus Hobart came down from the eastern rock face that evening. He came across the snow crust at his usual pace, the mule behind him, his long rifle at its accustomed position. He stopped when he reached the cave. He looked at the drift that had buried it. He looked at the tunnel mouth that had been dug out. He looked at Adelaide. He looked at Jonah. He nodded once. That was all. But it was enough. He said, "You held. We held." Esme would be proud. Adelaide felt the air go out of her chest. She did not cry. She only looked at the old man with the buckskin coat and the long rifle and the mule behind him, and she said, "Thank you." He looked at Jonah. "Boy." "Yes, sir." "You did your part. I moved the snow. That was the part that needed doing." Jonah nodded, solemn. Linus turned to go. He stopped. He turned back. "Miss Voss." "Yes, there's something I never told you about the day your grandmother walked me down to the wagon train." Adelaide waited. "She gave me a piece of dried apple out of her own stores. She didn't have many. She said, 'Pass it on when the time comes.'" He reached into his coat. He pulled out a small cloth pouch. 40 years, Miss Voss. I've been carrying that apple. Different apple by now. I traded the original to a Shoshone woman in '55 for a bear claw. She needed it more than I did. But I kept the agreement. I always carry one." He held the pouch out. Adelaide took it. Inside was a single dried apple slice, wrinkled, dark, carefully preserved. "That's yours now," Linus said. "Pass it on when the time comes." She closed her hand around the pouch. She nodded. She could not speak. He touched the brim of his hat. He turned. He walked back toward the eastern rock face. The mule followed. Adelaide stood at the cave entrance until they were gone. Then she turned to her son. He was looking up at her, his small face full of something she could not name. "Mama." "Yes. What's that for?" She looked at the pouch in her hand. She thought for a long moment. Then she said, "It's a promise, baby. Between women across time. Great-grandma made it. Mr. Hobart kept it. Now it's mine. And then mine." She looked at him. "Yes. And then yours." He nodded. Like that was an acceptable inheritance, the only kind that had ever truly mattered. 3 weeks later, Hollis Peterson came up the path with a folded paper. He did not come empty-handed. He brought a sack of seed beans for the spring, and a small jar of honey, and a pair of warm boots that had been donated by a family in town who had heard the story. The story. That was what they were calling it now. The Voss woman and her boy. Halloran's Folly. The cave that held when the houses didn't. Hollis stood in the cave entrance. He held out the paper. "Adelaide." "Yes, this is a petition." She took it. She unfolded it. She read it. It was a petition to the county land office, requesting formal recognition of her claim to the 17 acres designated Halloran's Folly, requesting tax abatement for 10 years in acknowledgement of the land's character. It bore 23 signatures, most of them legible, a few cramped with the hand of people who did not write often. At the bottom of the page, small, in a hand she recognized, was the signature of Mortimer Thorne. Adelaide stared at it. She did not speak. Jonah had come to read over her shoulder. He could read most of it now. She had taught him through the winter. He pointed at the bottom signature. "Mama?" "Yes, that's the lawyer." "Yes." He signed it. "Yes. Why?" She thought for a long moment. She did not answer right away. She waited until she had the right words. Then she said, "Because he learned something this winter, baby. Same as us. Just slower." Jonah considered this. He nodded. He said, "Can I keep it?" "Keep what?" "The paper, with the signatures. Can I keep it with my stones?" She handed it to him. She said, "Yes, keep it. When you are older, you will know what it cost the man who signed it last." Jonah folded it carefully. He carried it to his bundle. He placed it inside, next to the 7 gray stones, the piece of birch bark with the owl on it, the wooden horse her father had carved, and the small charcoal drawing he had made in the cave entrance one afternoon in November. He tied the bundle. He came back. That night, Adelaide opened the notebook. She turned to a blank page near the back. She wrote in her own hand, beneath all the entries her grandmother had made 29 and 30 years ago. February 1879. Adelaide Voss, granddaughter of Esme Halloran. Survived the winter at the cave you marked with your initials. My son Jonah is 6 years old. He learned the things you wrote down. He held the notebook the night I climbed the fissure. He kept the fire going while I slept. He gave me a stone in October and a stone in February, and they are the same stone, made twice. I know now that you ran here too, in 1849, from a husband who could not be lived with. I did not know. My mother never told me. Maybe she did not know either. But you wrote it down, and you kept the notebook, and you waited. If you are reading this, whoever you are, some daughter or granddaughter or great-granddaughter of mine I will not live to see. Remember this. We come from a line of women who chose stone when they had nothing else. We chose what holds. The wound was real. The foundation is real too. Stone makes no promises, but stone breaks none either. Welcome home, child. She closed the notebook. She put it back on the shelf. The fire cracked once, then settled. Outside, in the February night, somewhere far to the south, water was beginning to remember spring. Adelaide added one piece of hardwood to the fire. She sat down beside her son. He leaned into her side. The cave held them, the way it had always held the women who came here. She closed her eyes, and she stayed. The end.